Okay, we're about to get started. Just a quick announcement for those of you who are joining us virtually. Just help me out and do your best you can to keep yourself muted unless you're pop in and say something. Okay, everybody want to take a seat? Are we good? Okay. Hi, I'm Amber Bales. I am the OPC Education Co-Chair, and this is our first meeting where we're combining the Ohio Digitization Interest Group with OPC in hopes of giving like just some new breath and new content. It's something that we've been working on for about 2 years. And with all the technical issues this morning, it seems like maybe we need it more than 6 months. So we picked Parsons Library. I know that a lot of you probably have never been here, but I know it was something that was really exciting for the planning committee to do because it got us out of downtown Columbus and into a different part of Columbus that many people from across the state maybe haven't been to. And one of the other features is that there is $2 Radio, which is an indie book publisher across the street. So I encourage you to just check that out if you have a little bit of time after the meeting. What else I should add to that before we get going? Okay. So our first person up here is going to be Holly Witchey. Holly Witchey has a PhD in European painting and sculpture and 30 years of experience in museums and higher education. She is currently the executive director of ICA Art Conservation, and she is going to present From Drips to Deluge, Disaster Planning in Buckeye State. You want to go ahead and share?
Sorry, looks like I am sharing, but I'm not. No, but can I have a thumbs up that people can hear me? If you can hear me. I know you guys can hear me. Okay.
We can hear you. Holly.
Yep.
We can hear you.
You can hear me. Thank you. All right. There we go. My name is Holly Witchey. She just told you who I was, so I don't need to tell you that anymore. And a little bit like Aslan in C.S. Lewis, I'm not going to tell you the story of disaster planning in Ohio. I'm going to tell you the story of disaster planning from 2018, when I moved from teaching graduate museum studies at CWRU to ICA Art Conservation. I'd always been around art conservation. I'd never been in a regional lab before, which is, I liken it to suddenly becoming the stepsister that nobody cares about, because the public's perception of art conservation is that the only thing important that happens in conservation happens in large art museums. The 47th time that the night watch is completely clean. So when I say I'm from a nonprofit lab, there's that people look at me kind of strangely and say, "Oh, do you know people at big museums?" I'd like to point out, like a lot of you who may work at smaller libraries or institutions, we have the same degrees as all those people have. We just choose to work in a different area. I'm giving you a little time to read any of this nonsense on the screen. That we'd like to, we're the oldest regional art conservation lab in the country. We were started by 2 monuments men, actually started by the directors of 6 museums in 1951, 2 of whom were monuments men. We do about 350 projects a year. We reach about 15,000 people a year with our education programs. But for years, we've been the center for something that used to be called NEOAFR, the Northeast Ohio Alliance for Response, because in the early 2000s, as the Alliance for Response network built up from FAIC and AIC, there was a Southern Ohio group and there was a Northern Ohio group. And as we got working together more and more over the past couple of years, we changed our name to ARROW. So now we're the Alliance for Response Ohio. And I would be remiss if I didn't thank all of the people who make these education projects possible for us, which is Cuyahoga Arts and Culture, the Ohio Arts Council and lyricists, to whom I'm extremely grateful. So I'm just going to start with some of the projects we've done and some of the things that I think are useful for disaster planning. We got a nice grant from lyricists in 2018 to do to model a wet salvage workshop. And the first time we did it was for museums, archives, and libraries at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame archives in 2018. You see a picture of Tom Clareson there, who's one of my heroes, you'll see in several other pictures as photographs as well. This is something that art conservation labs, particularly regional art conservation labs, do particularly well, is teach people how to do things. It's a hands-on wet salvage and a controlled burn plus classroom activities. It was a full day event. Unfortunately, I've just learned in the past 4 weeks, because we have another wet salvage workshop coming up, that you can no longer do controlled burns in the state of Ohio. And what we used to do was we would go to Goodwill and we would buy paintings and chairs and ceramics and metals and paper and put them on pallets with straw, and the firemen would come out and we would set it on fire, and the firemen would pick paintings in, and museum and archive people would turn white. But you would have to say, if you don't want them to kick the Rembrandt in, invite them to your place and tell them the things that are important. Because there were concerns about toxicity or in the air, now what you can burn in the state of Ohio is pallets and straw. And we just don't feel anymore that burning pallets and straw does anything for our crowd. The other thing we used to do is use my words, fire extinguisher training. But now you can't do real fire extinguisher training anymore. They have these, I don't know if you've ever seen them, they have these big screens and they have a fake fire extinguisher, and the fire comes up, and if you do it right, it goes out on the screen. Useless. How many people have actually used a fire extinguisher to put out a fire? Well done. That's a big crowd. It's not easy, isn't it? And every time you do it with real people who've never done it before, they spray the water over the fire, and that's not where you spray it. Where do you spray it? The base. There you go. So we did these hands-on wet salvage and a controlled burn. We bring things in, we take the dirty stuff and the wet stuff in, and we teach people how to salvage it. And these are some images from this first display. I like the image. Well, I can't see him really down there, but one of those is June Francisco, who's the collections manager for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And it's always fun when June does something. In October 2018, and right after that, we had a first responder readiness meeting. And what's a disaster meeting about unless there's a disaster? So we had as our speaker, it was November 1st, 2018. We had Barbara Poma, who was the Pulse nightclub owner, where 40 people were murdered in Orlando, California, mass murdered in California. She was due to speak. She was due to fly up November 1st. She was going to get on a plane that morning because she wanted to see her kids trick or treat. And she never got there to be our speaker. Luckily, my good friends from Cuyahoga County Office of Emergency Management, you must get to know your Office of Emergency Management people. They are fantastic. They were watching the weather. And they were coming to the event, and they brought a speaker. They actually had on their staff at the time the man who'd been the head of the Red Cross team responding to the Parkland High School mass shooting. And he stepped up and gave a talk. It was a fantastic event. We invited museum and archive and library employees and first responders in Cuyahoga County. Here you see some of them sitting and listening very intently. So the officers in their uniforms. And I want to point out this gentleman who's in the red shirt right here, an Ohio Wesleyan graduate. This is Paul Landis, who had a book 2 years ago, Final Witness. He's the only surviving Secret Service agent who was with Kennedy in Dallas during the motorcade. He came, and it was funny because he serves on the Shaker Heights community policing. And they did a active shooter, and they asked him to pretend to be the president in a motorcade car and they had no idea who he was. Very, yeah. And then this guy, my hero, Tom Clareson, did an active shooter scenario. And we did scenario. It's the opening night of a performance or concert at one of the theaters in Playhouse Square. There's a full house. And so the first responders and the museum and archive and library people talked about what was going on. It was fantastic. We had one, I'm not going to mention the institution, we had, we talked, the first responders stood up and talked about at the point there's a disaster in your institution, the first responder who arrives at your institution is immediately in charge. And we had, one of these guys ex-military saying, not at my museum. It's not like,
Yes, yeah.
So that was really fun. And we developed questions for cultural heritage and performing arts organizations that they could ask the first responders and develop questions for the first responders just to get people to know one another better. Our employees trained for incidents. In early 2019, we did a screening of the film The Rape of Europa, and we did this again for first responders and for graduate students who were studying art history and museum studies across Cuyahoga County. And this was interesting because, again, what's a disaster event without a disaster? For the first time ever, the morning of that event, the Cleveland Museum of Art lost power where we were having it. So they called me at 6 a.m. and said, well, you can still have your event. We think we're going to have enough power to screen the film, but we can't do your coffee service or anything. So we scrambled and went out and got coffee. And you can see attendance was kind of light because the power was off all over University Circle. Nevertheless, we had a good discussion, including, no offense to anyone who is younger than 25 in the room, but a number of people who said they'd never known about the art issues in World War II that works of art were. So it's always a good thing to do. Anyway, building partnerships, that's what we're all about, one step at a time. And again, I love Cuyahoga County Office of Emergency Management. These are two of my heroes in Cuyahoga County. That's Mark Christie on the left, who's director of Cuyahoga County Office of Emergency Management. He looks stupid in almost every picture I find. Nice looking guy, but he looks like, he looks kind of like the Gomer Pyle for those of us who are old enough. And then, when I tell people that one of my heroes, or one of my institutional heroes is the Northeast Ohio Sewer District, they look at me like I'm insane. I worry about a lot of things. The sewer district, I have no worries at all. Water situation in Cuyahoga County, we are good. I sit in rooms doing tabletop exercises with these guys. Again, many of them are ex-military, and somebody will say, so there's a chemical bomb is dropped on Brown Stadium in the middle of a game. What do you do? And they're all on their computers doing scenarios. And we can, in 25 minutes, we can have 2 fire trucks out there and we can have showers set up and we can walk everybody through the shower. And I just sit there and like, we got some big museums we could put people in, but these guys are great. The next thing we did with them was a program called Increasing Threats. Well, this was actually something Mark Christie and I did, Increasing Threats to Arts and Cultural Assembly. We went down into one of the national parks, can't remember where it was, because twice a year, all the Cuyahoga County Office of Emergency, all of the Office of Emergency Management people from the entire state of Ohio gather. That's a fun group of people. That's where you find out that people in your county are building nuclear reactors and you don't know about it. And they find out about it and have to go clean them up. You wanna find a group of people who are worried about things all the time on your behalf. Get with your Office of Emergency Management people. So by 2019, in Cuyahoga County, we had a seat at the table. That's the incident room at the offices, the Cuyahoga County incident room. If there is a incident in Cuyahoga County today, my colleague Wendy Partridge has her go bag pack. We always have go bag packs because we can expect to be called to be there between 24 hours and 7 days if we're called, and you just have to pick up and go. Of course, realistically, the arts and culture people, we are not so much at the front end of a disaster because it's people's lives first. We come in for long-term recovery because people feel, citizens feel like a community has recovered when their libraries are open again, when their museums are open again, when their musical groups are playing. That's the marker. So we're gonna see the table. Since then, we've done twice annual webinars on May Day and September on behalf of Arrow. I brought these two images in. This was the first one we did. I can't remember the date. But one of the objects we had in the lab was a first responder jacket from Shanksville that needed some conservation work done on it, and it went to an exhibition at the embassy in London on the one of the anniversaries of 9/11. Since then, we've done all sorts of things. Big shout out to Andrew. There's Andrew Mancuso, who he's behind me. That's scary. Recently we've had, the past 2 years, we've had, because it was such popular, we've had Jen Myers from the Museum of the United States Air Force, who talks about what to do with toxic objects in your collection, and they have live ammunition and parts of people. They have all sorts of things down there that you can't imagine, not to mention hangars full of I probably shouldn't, I don't know that they have parts of people. I shouldn't say. I don't remember what it was, but they have very interesting things out there. Jen, sorry if you're on this. I'm really sorry I even said that. But one of the things we did during that we thought was important that we could do during the pandemic is we had an intern from Walsh University, Megan Pellegrino, another hero of mine who runs the museum studies program there, sent us Elizabeth Glander, who had had a previous career as a ballerina, a professional ballerina. And she spent 3 years mapping all 88 counties in Ohio for cultural heritage institutions, sites, performing arts institutions. We have the master document, the next stage in this is at some point when I get some free time and some funding to send them to each representatives in each county. So if you'd be willing to look over the list in your county or partner with someone, please give me a call and I'll send you the county list we have for you. That's a very satisfying project, I've got to say. The other thing I would encourage all of you to do, if you're not in Cuyahoga County, because we've already done it, what's in a name? Until July 7th, 2023, emergency support function number 11 was called agriculture and natural resources. Nowhere in the emergency plans for Cuyahoga County was there any mention of cultural heritage. So we worked with them to rewrite the emergency support function, and now we're agricultural, natural, and cultural resources. You can do that too. If you call your Office of Emergency Management, they will be happy to help, have you help. As I said, a seat at the table has significant drawbacks. Wendy Partridge and I cannot be the only two people responsible for disasters in Cuyahoga County. It's just not possible. And Cuyahoga County has 56 different communities around it. So we've got to figure out a way to engage all of them. So I want to talk for my last few minutes about projects that I still hope will materialize. Another hero of mine, I recognize her sitting over here, Marcella. We had this great series of conversations with the Ohio State Library about sending out a survey to all the cultural heritage organizations on the list and getting some base data. And bless their hearts, they produced the survey. And then it's just sort of.
I want to give a shout out to Sarah Castro.
Absolutely, Sarah.
Right.
We did it. You guys did it. And we'll send it out someday. We'll revise it now, but it's just one of those things that everybody became busy and got lost in the shuffle. So this is an important project that needs to be done for Ohio. We just haven't got to it yet. We're not here to, yeah. So we know it's a drawback that Wendy and I are representing Cuyahoga County. So we wrote this little FAIC grant. And, we're Cuyahoga County. We're one of the 3 biggest counties in Ohio. We can do anything. Not only can we do anything, we can do it so well that we can model it for the rest of the state. Yeah. So we wrote this little grant, and that's what we said we were gonna do, and what's his name? Tom Clarison came up and helped. And we had this great representative group of people. We sent out invitations. They came up. It was a wonderful meeting. Mark Christie talked. They did a little exercise for us. Every single person at that table, except for Jason Akins, who's the man, well, you can't see where I am. He's leaning forward, sort of next to me. He's from Canton. I asked him up. He's from the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Every single one of those people was from Cleveland. That's only one of the districts. This is the problem we have in Cuyahoga County. We have so many big gorillas. You know, the Cleveland Museum of Art, Western Reserve Historical Society, Severance Hall, lots of big players, that it's hard to get people to gather together to find the time to figure out how we're gonna make this community that if a disaster happens, the phone tree starts and we start figuring out a way to work with the county to get things done. And we learned about hubris and humility, because here it is, almost 2 years later, we still haven't gotten our act together. Jason Akins down there in Stark County wrote a grant, got it 3 months ago. They have a Facebook site. He has this team of remarkable heroes. Jason, Megan from Walsh, Christy Davis from Canton Art Museum, Alexander Kuhn from Massillon, Brianna Burkle, best intern ever except for Danny behind me. Walsh University, Matthew Sweeney, the Stark County Office of Emergency Management Officer, and Timothy Warsteller from Stark County Office of Emergency Manager. They're having their motivational meeting in 2 weeks, I think. And they are taking it. They are actually providing the model for how other counties in Ohio can get together. But you need to have like 8 doers who just say, we're gonna do it, we're gonna get it done. They've got bylaws, they've got plans. One of the things we'll send you after this meeting, I hope, is, oh, don't look at that yet. Well, and this is my thank you slide, and one of my other heroes, Andrew Mancuso, and that young lady behind him, Danny Fish. The thing about disaster planning is, you guys all know this, you can't do it on your own. So I guess what I've learned since 2018 is how important all of you are to this process, and how important OhioDIG and OPC is to making this work in Ohio. I'm happy to answer any questions. Or intelligent, whatever you want.
And we do have like a good 15 minutes later at the end, so we can do kind of a round robin of questions.
Great.
What's your questions?
Okay.
And so I'm actually going to kind of interrupt. Yes, thank you, Holly. That was amazing. Clearly, public speaking is my favorite thing to do. I'm going to interrupt our programming and do just a little special treat. Eric Obanoff is here. He is one of the co-founders of $2 Radio. And I know that we are all librarians that like get lost in spreadsheets and preservation and processing. But I thought maybe we'd like 5 minutes to learn a little bit about the indie publishing house and imagine what other librarians get to spend their time thinking about. So if you want to, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And if you're welcome to just share a few minutes,
Sure.
wherever you like, from here, there.
Yeah.
Okay, yes.
Yeah, so my name is Eric Obanoff, and I got into book publishing so I could be a public speaker as well. Just kidding. I want to work on books. That's it. I brought some as like visual references too. You guys want to like pass it back. So we started as a book publishing company. It's called $2 Radio. Our storefront cafe is across the street from the library here. Well, I guess before we jump in too, we are right there. South High School is like a block away as well. And I also coach soccer there, the high school team. And it's just like this library in particular, and libraries in general, and is such like a pole star in our community for, you see this flood of kids like after school coming to get homework help and study and just have a safe space to hang out. And so thank you for all the work that you guys do in the community to uplift groups and everything like that. But yeah, like I said, we started as a book publishing company. We're celebrating our 20th anniversary this year. Our books have been like honored by the National Book Foundation, finalists for like the LA Times Book Prize. That book, Us Fools, that's somewhere getting passed around, was our big hit last year. It was National Book Critics Circle Award for Fiction finalists, one of 5 finalists. Should have won, didn't win. Sorry. But my wife and I started the press, and at the time we were living in San Diego, we didn't necessarily have any experience with publishing. We didn't know what we were doing. I went to the library. I got like HTML for dummies, like learned how to make a website and stuff like that. And around that time too, as we were just starting out, we read a couple books like Business of Books by Andre Schifrin, who's the publisher at Pantheon for a bunch of years. And in that book, the subtitle is How International Corporations Took Over Publishing and Changed the Way We Read. And so it says a lot. There's been so much consolidation in book publishing. He charts it from the post-World War II era to the early 90s, when like Random House and Penguin Random House now are just like gobbling up all these different imprints, which many of them started as family-run enterprises. And interestingly enough, we just announced last week that we were acquired by 7 Stories Press, which is a fabled publisher of Octavia Butler and Angela Davis and Annie Ernaux. So we're really thrilled by that development. It's opened us up to like working as part of a team as opposed to just my wife and I bickering about what we want to take on. But I think the big thing for us as a small publisher is, there's a small core group of us who are deciding what to take on, and we're really passionate about the work. And oftentimes, if you read a book by a small publisher, then you're probably inclined to like the taste of many of their other books as well. It's really easy, I guess, just to like, and that's partly why I got into it too. I realized I was going to bookstores and looking in libraries and looking more specifically at the logo on the spine to try to find those types of books that were more pushing the envelope instead of like the more commonplace stuff that was being published by the bigger houses. Our best-selling book is They Can't Kill Us Until They Kill Us by Henry from Durkee. It's moved around 100,000 copies and has gone on to be MacArthur Genius Grant recipient and best-selling author, National Book Award finalist, couple books. And then 8 years ago, we opened up our storefront cafe because we really just wanted to have a footprint in the community. And in many ways, like emulate what you guys do as libraries too, just being that safe third space. It was right on the heels of the 2016 election. And for us, we just really wanted to throw up a flag and say, not focus on those things like what we're against, but saying like these are the issues that we stand for and support. And creating a safe space in the community for people to gather around those ideas. So we do host everything from very traditional author readings to a monthly magic show, monthly like variety show, comedy night, storytelling, open mic, and everything like that. But as a small press publisher, it's it always feels like you're pushing water uphill with the broom, and so it's just really rewarding, I guess, when you have the opportunity to like interact with people around the books and stuff like that, which is what you're most passionate about. So I don't have anything additional to say. If you guys have any questions for me, that's who we are. You're welcome to come by when the conference is over to our spot. We have a bunch of our books and 7 Stories books too. You guys are welcome to paw and pick up if you'd like.
Very much so. Well, thanks again, Eric, for that wonderful presentation, encouraging all of us to support our independent publishers, our independent, we run businesses and get out there in the community and make a difference as we do in our jobs. We can do it in our personal life as well. To continue with our presentations, we have Michael Scherer-Zielinski, who is the Digital Archives Preservation Manager at the Western Reserve Historical Society, where he's been facilitating all things digital since 2019, along with Sean Martin, who is Curator for Jewish History at Western Reserve Historical Society. He is the co-editor with John Grabowski of Cleveland Jews and the Making of a Midwestern Community. They are going to present for us lessons learned, responding to fire in a library and archives. Michael, Sean?
You guys want to share?
Yeah, let me bring it up.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Hi, everybody, we've already been introduced. So I'll skip that part of my notes. Yeah, thanks for having us here to talk about disaster preparedness, readiness. It's not a topic you want to, like, I guess, have experience with, but we're happy here to be sharing ours. And before we get into like the lessons learned from experiencing the fire, we just like to, at least I'd like to mention the WRHS leadership team who really did a great job responding to the disaster. And I have to say this because some of them might be tuning in on Zoom, but also because the 18-month span between like September 2023 and March 2025, it would have been, you know, significantly, I think, more difficult without their kind of leadership and foresight. We had a disaster preparedness plan approved something like 2 weeks, you know, before the fire. And so we're very thankful that it was approved. It led to some quick and critical, you know, decision making. Despite that, you know, with our disaster plans in hand, there were still a lot of things to be learned. And so we'll get into that in a moment. We wanted to first kind of briefly outline the extent of the WRHS library space and collections, kind of just to give you an idea of the impact of the disaster and the scale of the recovery or restoration that we went through. And so the WRHS library comprises of 4 floors. The first floor houses our reading room and administrative headquarters. We have processed collections on the second and third floor, and we have unprocessed collections in the lower level. And so here you see our reading room that was pre-fire, but you know, after our renovation in 2021. So that's probably sometime between like late 2021, early 2023. As part of the renovation, all of our admin staff moved to the library. So they have all their offices and workstations kind of past the glass on the right side there. The archives team sits just inside that area in a little like row of offices that we've dubbed like Archives Row. And yeah, we've also listed the extent of the collections here, although I think we probably have quite a bit more, especially if you include all of our museum objects. We probably have upwards of like 80,000 linear feet between the History Center and our storage facility in Macedonia and Hale Farm and Village and our other historic properties. The point is that we have a lot of stuff. And that was a fact that was made just like abundantly clear throughout this whole process. So Sean, why don't you tell everybody about the disaster?
Yeah, hi, everyone. It's great to be here. So this is really the story of a burn that was not controlled, unfortunately. So it happened on Thursday morning in September 2023, and no one was at work yet except for a security guard, and everything really worked as it should have. The alarms went off. The guard checked out what was happening. The fire department came very quickly, and the fire, I think the fire was put out really probably in something like 6 or 8 minutes, but it was still a significant fire. And the area affected really was our lower level unprocessed storage area. The cause of the fire really was an electrical fire connected to the elevator occurring in the mechanical room next to the elevator, if I understand all that correctly. I don't know more than that. And then the fire went into, as I mentioned, our storage area. So you're looking at an image of our the area right outside of the elevator where we stored supplies and some removals. We're very fortunate to say that there was no permanent damage in the sense that no collections were lost, but all collections materials were damaged by soot. The most significant of that damage was the water damage that affected 129 boxes. They came, of course, from the fire department's putting out the fire. But as I mentioned, really all materials from the lower level to the first, second, and third floors were affected by the soot. And as we had moved all the staff from the Cleveland History Center, the name of our site on East Boulevard at the Historical Society, all of our education, museum staff, development, business staff, we were all working in the same area. So what that meant, of course, is that they all had to relocate as well. So even though this affected really just the library of the Historical Society, it really affected everyone in the sense that everyone had to be relocated. And then this actually, these are something we'll show you some after pictures in a bit. But on the left, what you're looking at is a fairly decent before picture of our main storage area. And you see we have too much stuff on pallets there, etc. One thing to just kind of note is that, on the right, you see that we have different kinds of boxes, some oversized materials, some nice white acid-free boxes, some other boxes that are not acid-free, etc. Some things in the dreaded plastic tubs, those are worth noting. And then on the right, what you see is a picture that is already a couple days after the fire. Those pallets that were on the left were moved to the right as we were worried about water damage to the pallets themselves. And so, so these were collections that were moved onto new pallets before everything that was moved out. And then we'll go on to the next slide here. And this is really just several more pictures of the damage. You can see, one thing, one's kind of lesson learned, of course. None of our lessons really are big revelations. They're things that we already know or should know. One thing is that, of course, materials that are left out, right, will be damaged more than others that are housed, right? So these were some books that were saved for removal, I believe, and some archival materials that were also kind of mid-process. In the kind of top picture, second from the left, is a water damaged box. You see in the lower level box, you see some of the computer equipment that was damaged. And then in the upper right, probably the most kind of visible damage that you can see, this is a fair example of the kind of soot damage that was in our lower level basement, where you can see it's all black on top of the white boxes, but then we run our finger. The damage, of course, was, it did, like I said, even materials on the third floor were damaged by soot. Generally speaking, the materials on the third floor, and even really on the first floor, in many areas of the first floor, were not damaged like what you're seeing this picture here, which is really very good to see. But even so, we could see that on process collections on the third floor, so stored in these regular record storage boxes with the openings, right? Even in those boxes, you could pull out the acid-free folders and you could see damage from soot on those acid-free folders, even on the third floor. So now I'll turn it over to Michael to talk some about the recovery itself.
Yeah, so witnessing, I guess, the recovery of the library, I could come up with a lot of different words. I'll choose amazing and overwhelming. Because of our disaster readiness plan, we already had identified potential vendors as part of who we would reach out to. We already had identified some of the conservation centers that we would contact. So Belfour and the Chicago Conservation Center were relatively quick to get on site and kind of start helping us out, which was really great because we had, somewhere around 60,000 linear feet, taking up like 1,800 pallets of material to move. And that was all to do without a working elevator. And I'll show you how they accomplished that in a moment. But yeah, the soot pollution was so pervasive that everything had to be either cleaned, as was the case with the collections, because I mean, it found its way like through any handhold, under any lid. It was pretty crazy. So yeah, it either had to be cleaned or it had to be replaced. Like the reading room carpets and metal shelving and wallpaper. And so we, library staff, Sean and I, our colleagues, we didn't perform the conservation or restoration work ourselves. But we did all receive like a deep dive in the considerations and procedures for conservation work. For example, I was directly involved in identifying nitrate film and nitrate negatives that had to be moved to a cold trailer because we had those in just in the room. So learned just how difficult that was to accurately, identify nitrate. And then we all learned about deodorization and freeze drying and, just other types of treatments. So let's look at a couple pictures of that. I should go back and say, this here is a picture of the pallets staged at the remote processing center, which was in Bainbridge, about an hour away from the history center. We had to find a site that was within, an hour or so of our headquarters, so that we could still get to the materials, still do, reference requests, still, just kind of keep an eye on everything. Unfortunately, we were able to find one within that distance that had, the proper HVAC and security and all of those pieces. So yeah, some other pictures of the recovery. You can see things getting cleaned up. The top left there, you have members from the Chicago Conservation team just doing some sort of initial cleaning and assessment. And then next to that, a small picture, that was our temporary workspace that the library got moved to, the library team. And so, yeah, we have desks, we have shelving. You'll notice there aren't any windows. It was okay. It wasn't ideal, but we made it work. Next to that at the top, you have like the processing center. So you have the Belfour team members and their workstations where they were hand cleaning everything, vacuuming and sponging and reboxing every box, folder, page. The little blue fan looking thing, that's a hydroxyl generator. I will let you look up what hydroxyl radicals are and dig into that. Basically, it removed the scent from the materials. It's supposed to do it permanently, and we've noticed it did a pretty good job. And then top right, we have the same sort of area that we've shown in previous pictures, but now we have new boxes on new shelves. And then, yeah, bottom left, those are pallets being staged in the reading room, getting prepped to go out to the remote processing center. Next to that, just Belfour team members prepping materials for those pallets. Then we have 07 in our lower level where all of our unprocessed collections were. You can see, they're doing the power washing of the floor and the ceiling. And then lastly, the scissor lift to get down all of those boxes from the second and third floor because we did not have a working elevator. So we had at any, one time, 20 to 70, Belfour team members kind of huffing up and down the stairs or working on the scissor lift or, going between the history center and the remote processing center. And yeah, what did we learn from all of this other than don't set your archives on fire? For this presentation, we kind of just decided that we would focus on a few areas of observation, archival procedures, collection stewardship, staffing administration, and advocacy and visibility. So I'll hand it back to Sean to talk about archival procedures.
So I think really probably the biggest impact for me really was kind of in thinking in terms of what we what we have and also how we've collected it and how we've stored it and cared for it. In some cases, certainly not as, I would say not as well as we should have. So, and so again, these are the lessons that are not so much revelations, but I think important to recognize. So, and also, maybe what I've just said is another, is a long-winded way of saying that the steps of appraisal and accessioning really are as important as processing. Because we have a significant backlog, of course, as any institution. And so when I pointed out in the picture earlier that we have materials in all kinds of boxes and plastic tubs and all that kind of stuff, those are the sorts of things that really kind of made the process of recovery kind of difficult, because the longer a period materials remain unprocessed, the longer chance that they're not labeled, or labels aren't easily read, or whatever the situation might be, or people don't really kind of know it's there, and it makes things difficult. So, really some of the things we learned. Any oversized materials have to be appropriately housed and stored. Things have to come out of frames, for example. We have many items in frames on the tops of the shelving in our lower level, and kind of or sandwich between boxes and right. And it's terrible. It's a really a bad thing, because it means that materials are kind of dangerous to access, hard to access, not labeled appropriately, really. I think they cause problems later. Things just really simply have to be labeled, of course. And this is really an important thing that's really kind of easy to overlook. And I guess, probably the biggest lesson here, really, the most general thing I can say is that all of this is true, really, whatever the sorts of weaknesses there are, all of the weaknesses of the institution are going to come painfully to light. And so that means that the materials that an important donor has given to you, but that don't really fit into the collection, but you still kind of have sitting around and haven't dealt with appropriately yet, whether it's 2 boxes, whether it's a picture, whatever it is, all of that stuff that kind of fits into a different category that's not, it doesn't fit into a category, but all that stuff, like, it becomes a problem. It becomes something you have to deal with. It becomes something that you really have to take responsibility for. And that really is an issue. Here you're looking at 2 pictures there at the top, 2 framed items, a few framed items there that kind of not appropriately labeled, that are things that we need to take care of. You're looking at the bottom there, materials that were kind of just left in the open. And then, of course, as in any kind of situation like this, the more we would have digitized, the more we would have available in a different format, the more opportunity we would be able to engage the public when at a time when we kind of have to be down, right? And so I'll turn it over to Michael.
Okay, let's talk about collection stewardship. What you see here is what we call at the library a B&T, Bill and Tom's postcard project that shall not be moved. Yeah, so Bill and Tom's postcard project is a legacy project. It's one of several B&Ts we've encountered throughout the stacks at WRHS. Top picture is another one. In this case, we had containers on a rack, shelves for years, only to discover when we, rotated those to pack up, prep the materials for moving to the RPC, that they were removals, and didn't need to be there at all. So aside from the, obvious problems of these being unfinished projects, and a continuity issue, these projects caused problems for us when we went to move everything. We had to, create inventories for everything to the RPC because they weren't being stored in their proper location. So yeah, we've decided that moving forward, these projects must be the responsibility of library senior management. To help ensure that the collection materials are returned to their appropriate places. And I mean, that could be accomplished through, you know, an ongoing or an annual review of our storage spaces. Things that, yep, we should already be doing. And so speaking of, you know, I mentioned creating inventories. This was another big focus for us, as you can imagine, you know, when you're moving your entire holdings offsite. And Belfour was really capable in this area as well. They created their own matrix, which has become a really valuable resource for us moving forward. They basically re-inventoried all of our stuff. But you know, at the beginning of the project, Belfour was not familiar with our naming conventions. They didn't know our storage spaces. And so we had to, you know, pull the inventories together and create them in certain cases. And so for this, we used a tool that Sean and I had just learned about a few months earlier at the 2023 Association for Recorded Sound Collections Conference in Pittsburgh. And a group from Smithsonian, I think, was talking about, you know, preservation project, and they were using Airtable. And so we got turned on to that, started using that for some other projects. And it quickly became a very important tool for us as part of this response, because it helped us to kind of decentralize our data into like a collaborative, easily updatable, easy to access, you know, point. And we were all in the process of migrating to a new cataloging tool at the time of the fire. So Airtable became extremely helpful and continues to be a really helpful tool. It also was a moment where I think a lot of us recognized, you know, how few of us knew where this type of information lived, and how it can kind of become a single source of failure type of situation, where not everyone knows where your accessioning records are or what's in this cabinet. And so we're working now to kind of remedy all of that using tools like Airtable, but then also, you know, ensuring that all library staff, for example, knows where to find and how to access this type of information. Oops. And so my last point here is kind of a big one. It concerns reappraisal and deaccessioning. Bottom picture shows just a small group of our out-of-state newspapers. We have plenty more. And supposedly, you know, like 10 years ago, they were identified for reappraisal and inventoried and approved for deaccessioning. And so we figured, well, how great that it's leaving and doesn't have to come back. But that's exactly what happened. You know, Belfour cleaned them, they returned them. But this time they put them on new shelves. And this was done with all sorts of materials that probably didn't require it, like removals. And it's difficult, kind of, for me at least, to think about like the time and money that was spent packing it up and transporting it and cleaning it and returning it. And so, yeah, the point is that implementing an ongoing process of reappraisal and deaccessioning will ensure that, you know, your limited resources are spent only on those in-scope materials.
Okay, so to talk a bit about
Real quick, this is Sean's arm.
There's no PPE.
Okay, so in the interest of time, I'll wrap this up quickly, really just kind of by saying that you're seeing on top there kind of the space in transition for workers, and also then our temporary space on the bottom. We started this crisis with 7 employees in the library, and we finished the crisis with 7 employees in the library. 2 of those are different people, so staff will change. I should say Megan Gallagher is here. She's one of those who joined us in the middle of the crisis. The point is here just generally that, not surprisingly, we are a library and archives that is understaffed. And so again, this is you know, a weakness that's going to kind of come back to haunt your institution if it's not prepared, because everybody is really going to have to take responsibility for materials that are far outside of their job description. And so it really is other job duties as assigned. And that, you know, We handled it, we managed, we're coming through, and we're on the other side, but it's a challenging time.
How are we doing on time?
A couple minutes.
Couple minutes? Yeah, I wasn't sure if we should skip the really important advocacy and visibility part.
But just quickly.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so, Sean already mentioned the consequences of understaffing. And we're really limited in what we can accomplish due to that. And yeah, that's just complicated further by special projects. The fire became one. It really distracted from all the other, things that we were trying to accomplish. And we've slowly made our way back to all those things. But what I really want to say is that, special projects come at the consequence of collection stewardship. And our focus is kind of pulled away from maintaining what we've mentioned, kind of those critical and fundamental elements of archival administration. And yeah, so good part about the fire, if because there are some, it became kind of sort of a platform for us to share these concerns, to establish broader support, attention to kind of those archival priorities for internal and external stakeholders. It was also a reminder to ourselves that these are our responsibilities, not Bill and Tom's. And yeah, it was an opportunity to kind of reshare those concepts and practices with people that aren't regularly in the library space. And so yeah, we continue to kind of advocate for those, maybe with a little bit of renewed enthusiasm and like maybe just a little bit more awareness of what the professional library staff are doing. And yeah, that awareness is huge. All of us on the team, I think, have a much better idea of the extent of our collections, the diversity of them, the range of formats, and let's see what else.
Well, so if I could just wrap up to conclude, I think that really what we have all on the staff, kind of what we've all realized is that we need, of course, better sources for our collections, but the point is our commitment to our donors, and ultimately not just to our donors, but really to our mission in the public. And if we keep that in mind, then hopefully we'll be all right in the end. And start, making the best decisions that we can to care for the collections more appropriately. Thanks.
Thank you both, Michael, Sean, for that great presentation. I know we all probably have a few books in our special collections that smell like smoke because they've been in a room with a fireplace, not since they've been in a fire. So hopefully that was, you guys were able to get a lot of that squared away, and I know it's an ongoing process. It's something we hopefully will never have to deal with ourselves. Up next, we have Tom and Katie from Lyricist. Tom Clareson is project director of the Performing Arts Readiness Project, funded by the Andrew Mellon Foundation to help performing arts organizations nationwide learn preservation procedures. He serves as senior consultant for digital and preservation services at Lyricist, and as vice president on the board of directors for the Foundation for Advancement in Conservation. And Katie Cutlinger is the program leader for consulting services at Lyricist, where she specializes in digitization, space planning, and strategic planning. Katie has also worked for Lyricist previously as an outreach librarian before she became program leader. So I'd like to turn the floor over to them. Tom, Katie, thank you very much.
Overstaff is so good. Yeah, that's what you guys said. It was awesome. Yeah. Well, you got an 8-ball out of it.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for letting Tom and I come today, and we really appreciate it, especially for Tom and I both, because we're both Ohio natives. I've worked in the archival field before joining Lyricist in Ohio for a number of years, and so did Tom. So it's really nice to get to see familiar faces, but then also get to see new faces. So before we get into the content of our presentation today, I'd like to actually introduce the work that we do and tell you a little bit about Lyricist. So Lyricist is a nonprofit library consortial group. We are actually international in scope, though the bulk of our work is done in the United States. We work in the areas of open source software, e-resources, really the whole kit and caboodle for all different types of librarianship. Lyricist Consulting has been around for a number of years, and Tom and I are a 2-person team. We also employ external consultants whenever we have specialized projects, and then we also have internal consultants. So we actually have a career development program at Lyrasis where we work with Lyrasis colleagues and they come in to learn about what we do as consultants in our projects. Most of our work is actually centralized around cultural heritage institutions, specifically those that are archival in nature. Just talk about some of the areas and expertise areas that we have. Our main one that we get the most business on is preservation. Tom and I will routinely do environmental assessments for archival facilities or libraries as a whole to sort of give them guidance on what they can do for future collections care. Tom and I also do digitization together. So my area of emphasis has been digitization program building. Tom's is in digital preservation, so we've partnered on those projects as well. Two areas that I emphasize in is space planning for archival facilities. So we commonly work with architects, or if someone wants to do something independently on their own internally. We also are able to use 2D and 3D software, just like an architect, to assist them in those projects. And then we also will give archival best practices for facilities and institutions. I do records management unofficially. We actually are getting a lot of folks asking for that. And then the reason we're here today is my hero. Tom's area of emphasis is disaster response and recovery. And he actually, I'm going to embarrass you.
No.
I know, I'm sorry. He's one of the top in the country for what he does. He's done work with Hurricane Katrina in Puerto Rico. So really, he is our subject expert here for you today. I'm just sort of on the side. But I will join in on our conversation today when it blends them together. So take it away, Tom.
Thank you. And I'm really glad to see such a big group. And I know we have to probably do a lot of projection for the people who are on screen to hear us. We actually are going to get you all thinking, talking, and everything before lunch here. We have more questions for you than anything else. And then we're going to talk a little bit about how we can work with you and put some of our partner organizations like ICA and others into a team to work with you as well. So although we're down to, thanks to the good presentations of the 8 ball, we have some swag for you. The best answers that you give and best questions that you ask may earn one of these magic 8 balls.
And I also got a digital transitions t-shirt. Oh, yeah. That's right.
So we're always talking about with disasters, the fact that they're a difficult issue. And I think that the learning that we got, there were so many great things in that presentation about what we heard with the fire. I was just writing down notes like crazy on that. But if we could, so that people can feel sort of open to talk about some of these issues, put the sort of cone of silence into play and really think about confidentiality in the room and online, so that people can feel free to talk about any sort of disasters that they have. We've heard about a lot of these. We've heard about the natural disasters that might be happening out there. We've heard about the man-made disasters. Unfortunately, the ideas of active shooter disasters are something that we do have to think about. And I work a lot with in the arts activities that I do, and technical disasters as well. Not just the fact that I have my passwords written down on a piece of paper that my dog really did eat. And you can see a photocopy of that now with the dog chomp out of it. But just the idea that we have to keep the digital preservation going for our work records as well as for the kind of things that we do digitize. But we've been talking about something, and this is probably one of the topics that makes me most upset with disaster. We've been talking about something a lot in 2025. And that is the idea of administrative disasters. That's a new category of disasters that have come up. And of course, these are having to do a lot with funding and the lack of funding, and in some cases, the lack of support for programs that many of us have worked with for many years. That's important. But the other thing that we're seeing too is succession planning. The idea of, how are we going to make sure when people retire, when people decide to leave for another job, how are we going to make sure that our legacy projects. Not Bill and Ted's Great Adventure, but you know, the idea of legacy projects and legacy activities and keeping our organizations going. How are we going to keep that happening? So that's one of the things that we wanted to talk about today. So I wanted to start off with a couple of sort of questions to poll everybody here and see how many of you have had to deal with building issues in the past 2 years. I can see that. So about half the group. Okay. Do any of you feel comfortable sharing what kind of building issues?
Yeah, so this is actually not about a library in Ohio, because I just recently changed jobs.
Okay.
This is about a library in northern Delaware, the state of Delaware.
Okay.
So this dates back to a pandemic related problem. The library that I was employed at did not have a separate HVAC system for the building. So the whole building was not the library. It's a small university, small one-story library in a building with classrooms and administrative spaces and all of that. And without consulting anybody in the department, when the pandemic happened and everything shut down and the university went remote, facilities changed the air conditioning settings. And almost all of the books grew mold. And when I started there in it was August of 2024, so last August when I started working there, and they still haven't been able to fix the problem because the mold was growing, and they paid for vendors to clean the books, and the vendors cleaned the books, but the HVAC system was faulty and the humidity levels were still extremely high even after the pandemic. And as far as I know, at the time I left, that issue still the can continues to be kicked down the road, and there are still moldy books in the library.
And we hear that time and time again. I'm working with an organization in North Carolina where we've been working with them on and off for probably 10 to 15 years. And about every 2 years, the mold comes back. And it's just because some of our buildings are massive. There's not, a great opportunity for many buildings to be built completely from the ground up or for us to get new buildings. So we have to be really cognizant of those kind of issues. And I know it's a difficult thing to say, and I feel like it's better than it was 15 years ago when there was actually a book from the Smithsonian Institution that had role playing for how to have facilities people and librarians and archivists talk. That was a really good idea, and I wish that it wasn't out of, that it would be republished, but I think we have to be friends with our facilities people. And I think that there are some organizations around here that have done a really good job of that. But really, when you're building a new building, when you're putting in a new system, or when you have trouble with an old system, thinking about that is really important.
Yeah, I would say probably most of the projects that we get as consultants is involving mold damage. That I would say we get an average of 4 or so projects like that a year. So it's definitely something that's common. It happens to a lot of institutions, which is why I think it's important to always network with each other. And don't be shy to talk about the challenges and things that you're having, because someone in this room has dealt with it. And networking is powerful, and it will help you when you're in a pinch. You agree?
Definitely. And I think the other thing is to have, we're the archivists in a lot of cases of the materials that are in our buildings. How about having the floor plans of the building? How about having the mechanical drawings of the building so that we know where that HVAC is going? That's really important as well. We should have a set of that just as much as the operations facilities side should.
Yeah, because whenever we're doing our work as consultants, we're either in the HVAC rooms with the mechanics, we're walking on the roof. We're in it. So as much as you can get into it too, that's essential.
Other building issues that anybody would want to mention?
We can talk briefly, to kind of piggyback off of the mold problem. We haven't had any mold issues, but I am in the middle of applying in the application process for the NEH Sustained Cultural Heritage Grant in order to work on upgrading those HVAC systems that we have. And it is incredibly challenging to get cross working with the facilities departments. Luckily enough, I have now since the project, we've got a submission in and we were working through the project, I actually have someone that I liaise with in the actual facilities office. The way that the structure works in my institution, there is a on-site project sort of facilities manager in the libraries that is kind of the go-to for that. However, that position has to deal with all of the library buildings on campus, and that can create a bottleneck. So us being able to kind of, liaise with actual people in there can be really interesting. However, it is still a struggle. I had a fault on the humidifier that feeds our rare book vault, and it caused a leak. I can't get the access to the mechanical room because it is against university policy for me to have that access for whatever reason. It's in my workspace. It literally is a door in my workspace. I wasn't able to detect that leak until it had filled the floor of the room to come out into my area, soak through into my area, soak down through and through the light fixture on the floor below it. It's kind of amazing to think about, but we also have where I am, we have very hard water. So we have salts to soften that hard water. Those bags lay on the floor, and this leak had been going so gradually without us being able to look at it to see anything. It had come through the light fixtures and created salt stalactites from the way that it had dripped down through this had dripped down into our main stacks collection of the library. The fault was on the third floor is our special collections, which is where my office is, and it had gone down into there. But we have gotten some leak detectors. We use Conserve, and I am testing their leak detectors at the moment. So far they've worked out pretty well. So all that to say that even with having a lot of experience and bringing those different positions together, it's still a constant, it still can be a constant trouble to liaise with your facilities people to get that investment or understanding from the upper administration as well. They understand when they can see salt stalactites coming out of the ceiling, but when it's, our humidity is pinging at 60% and our temperature is spiking into the higher 70s into the 80s, we really need to address this. That can be a harder thing to communicate. And it's like I said, still kind of we're doing our best. We're doing the best we can to make some of those inroads.
That actually happened to me with a consulting job last year. The same thing, except instead of it being stalactites, it became a big thing of powder this high on a windowsill. And I put my finger into it and I go, why is there baking soda on the windowsill? Are they trying to keep the bugs out? And then I go, oh, that's not asbestos, is it? Well, I had to emergency shut the archive down. Oh. We brought in facilities at that very moment and we got it tested, and it was calcium from deposits. And yes, Tom, I never even got to tell you that because I never got to tell Tom that last week I found out what it really was. So happy to say I did not get asbestos poisoning. Yes, that's great. Worried about that for a while, but no, it's more common than you think, the things that happen within building structures. So
were you wearing gloves?
yeah, was I? No. Well, sometimes when you're a consultant and you walk in to see the things that people do as solutions, you think sometimes they get really creative. And I was hearing about baking soda earlier in the morning, which is why I was like, why is there baking soda on the windowsill? So these are the things that we come across.
Yeah, I mean, we do, for our classes and for disaster situations, we definitely, have nitrile gloves that we bring in
Yes.
and that type of thing. But, there was a good point, from what you were talking about. One of the things is no matter how big the university, or, how small the, archive might be, deferred maintenance is really a huge problem all across the state, all across the country. I was talking with a group of librarians and we came to an agreement in our discussion that we had been seeing the whole idea of most of the groups felt like they had between 10 million and $30 million of deferred maintenance at their institution. And so this is like small to medium sized organizations. I bet with the larger ones, it's even more than that. Definitely something to think of. Have any of you been dealing with administrative funding or staffing emergencies? Okay. Does anybody want to talk about those? So we have a lot of people in the back who are raising their hands. Do you want to mention something about that?
So I work in one library, but I'm going to be hired in a contract position at my former university's library. I used to work there as a student, they know me, still in the area. Basically, 2019, the archivists retired. I was told that I might be hired to fulfill the position. So I've been working on it for a little bit. And then pandemic hit. And it's been 6 years. And they've never hired anyone, they've never allocated money to work the archives. And they just found a few $1,000s to hire me as contract for the summer. And see what's going on, what's there, I don't know.
Yeah.
And it's full stressful.
Yes, yeah, and I think we'll see that kind of thing due to the pandemic and due to, staffing changes that happened during that time period. And I think we're probably about to see that again due to the funding changes that we're seeing. So we need to take a look. We had an opportunity to work with the Conservation Center for Art and Historic Artifacts, CCAHA, in Philadelphia. And we did a research project and a resource development project on succession planning for libraries, archives, museums, especially for the areas of collections care and collection stewardship. So take a look at the CCAHA website. They actually have broken off a part of their website to look in particular at that issue. Okay, so just a couple of quick questions because I know we only have a few minutes here. I wanted to find out where people are on policies. How many of you have some type of a disaster plan at your organization? If I could see a show of hands. So that's good.
Hey, that's
Probably
great.
about 2/3 of the organization. How many? Well, right, and it's sort of the idea of making sure that it's written, that you can find it, that you can practice it, that you can take it out and update it. You don't want to have it in the file drawer and then pull it out and say, oh, wow, everybody but me has left the organization. I'm a team of one. And that will not work out very well. How many of you have a preservation plan for your collection, like a long-term preservation plan to look at what would we do in 5 years and 10 years for the collection?
We are aiming for it, but no, not really, yeah.
I just want to say, I don't have one because there's never been a legal ruling about whether labs own their own treatment records, so I cannot digitize.
Okay,
And
right.
and so there they sit,
Wow.
that 50,000 treatment records.
Yeah.
In
And-
file cabinets.
would
Oh,
the objects?
That the attorneys have said I have to write every single person and find out whether we could digitize them.
And I know that that was a project that FAIC, the American Institute for Conservation, was looking at trying to do a national digitization project on those type of materials, but they probably jumped over a lot of copyright issues and had to think about that. One of the things that I would say is one of these great colleagues that Holly and I have, Sherilyn Ogden, who was with NEDCC and the Minnesota Historical Society, has written a book on developing preservation plans, long-term preservation plans, and it just got updated. There's a new edition that just came out, so take a look at that because that's sort of been a Bible. One other thing, and you might say, well, wait a minute, we're in the preservation business, we're not in this other type of business. What about crisis communications? How many of you know if your institution has a crisis communications plan? I can see a show of hands. Okay, we have some half-hearted hands going up around. And I think the other thing is to think about how important your organization is to the whole institution running. I mean, in a lot of cases, if we didn't have the library, archives, and museums at the organization, we wouldn't have the collected history of the place. And the other thing is, I don't love to bring this into it, but when I was in New Mexico, it really was interesting to hear there was an organization that had a flood in their library, and I said, what do you think your collection valuation is? How much would your collection be worth? And they had some ideas on what that was. And when they brought that to the university administration, the collection materials and the building that the library and archives were in were worth more than the 5 other buildings on campuses and everything that was inside of them. I bet that's true for you. And I know it's hard to get a collection valuation, so that's important to look at as well. So I think the only other thing that we wanted to say is we can assist you with these type of issues. We do this as third-party objective consultants, and we try to learn from what we hear at each of the organizations we go to. And really, Katie and I are sort of socialist consultants. We do a lot of our work, and discussions for free. But we also do have consulting services for a fee.
And we will actually be around after the meeting today. So if you have any questions that you want to discuss one-on-one, feel free to find me. Happy to assist in any way we can. And then we also have a free grant writing program where if you want us to look at a grant, get a second set of eyes, we'll support you in that too. You do not have to be a lyricist member for that. We're here to help each other.
We've been getting a lot of calls for that since January. So
yeah.
Tom, Katie, thank you very much for that. Very nice to know there's help out there for those of us that need it. At this time right now, I'd like to open up for questions for any of our presenters. If anyone has one in the room, by all means.
Yeah, hi.